In this beginner-friendly watercolor tutorial, I'll show you step-by-step how to paint this lovely winter plant just in time for the holiday season. Hey friends, welcome. My name is Shayda Campbell, and for the final video of October, we are starting off the winter holiday content around here by painting some watercolor holly. I'm going to give a full step-by-step tutorial so that you feel confident painting this beautiful winter plant. And if you haven't heard, the final video of the month on my YouTube channel is now decided by a viewer vote. If you want to partake in that vote, you can head over to my Patreon, patreon.com/ShaydaCampbell, and sign up. And there is a free option, although I suggest paying because you get weekly bonus content. And speaking of that bonus content, this week I have prepared a holly watercolor worksheet to really guide you step by step through this pretty plant. It breaks it down and makes it so simple. Watch the video, follow along with the worksheet. It's all available if you are a channel patron. And if you're not into subscriptions, I now have a storefront. And of course, you can just run over there and purchase this single worksheet. Let's start today's painting tutorial with a quick supply rundown. I am working on cold press paper today. It's an Arches block, 8x10, 140-pound paper, which is a good heavy weight, so it's not going to warp or buckle as I'm painting. I'm using one of my favorite paint sets. This is the 48-pan watercolor palette from Munyo. I've got paper towel for blotting my brush, a couple glasses of clean water. They're just sort of off screen here, but I do like one glass for cool colors, one glass for warm. And then I have a number of brushes, a flat wash brush, as well as a couple of small round brushes, something like a number 4 or 6. You could probably do everything other than the wash, which is when you'll use the flat wash brush. And I also have some ripped paper sitting here because we're actually going to do some practice painting as well as a final piece. And the final piece I'm going to do on just a little tiny piece of watercolor paper that I have ripped. It's about a 4x5 size for reference, so a little bit smaller than 4x6, obviously. And I'm taking a bit of washi tape. That's the final supply. You can also use painter's tape for this step. And I'm just creating a border on that tiny little piece of ripped scrap, cold pressed 140-pound watercolor paper. And then we're going to start by mixing up a really light pink. You could also do a light yellow or a light peach. I'm taking white with a whole lot of water. I'm mixing in a little bit of red, a little bit of yellow ochre to give it a peachy tone. Once I've got that nice watery peach color mixed up, I'm using the flat wash brush, the one that I mentioned in the supplies, to lay down a wash. So this flat, rather large brush is perfect for just giving you a very smooth block of color. And once we remove that tape, we're going to have this perfect little peach-colored rectangle. All you have to do is pick up the watery pigment and run the brush from left to right, stopping and starting on that tape. And then once you've completed that step, this is actually going to be for the finished piece. And we're going to kind of go backwards and do some practice holly. So let's set that aside. We'll let that one dry, and we're going to start mixing up the colors for the holly. And I started with red because the holly has those beautiful red berries. And I want to mix up at least 2 different shades of red, different colors of red, I should say. So you might want to mix a little violet into one, or maybe even mix a little brown in to darken it. And then I want to mix my greens. I'm using some of my favorite green pigments today. And if you're a fan of the channel, you'll know that they are deep phthalo green. And the first one that I grabbed there is gray green or green gray. Those are both in the Munyo set, and they're really natural. The deep phthalo green is a little bit cooler, but if you don't have a cool green, try mixing in a little bit of indigo, which I'm actually doing to darken it even more. And for a warmer earthy green, try mixing red or brown into the green that you have in your palette. With your colors mixed up, clean your brush, pick up some of the green pigment, and we are going to start by painting the holly leaves. Now, the holly is all about the leaves. They are dark green, they are glossy, and they're kind of spiky, kind of like a spiky scalloped edge. And so to paint these leaves, I run the belly of the brush across the page. I give myself that kind of oval leaf shape, and then using the tip of the round brush, so the fine point, I actually move the pigment that I've already put on the paper. I move it out. I push it outward from the edge of the shape, and I create those spikes, the look of those spikes. Let's try painting one that's on an angle. I just do one brush stroke And then I start moving that pigment out, giving it a spiky edge, but just on one side. So it kind of looks like you're viewing the holly leaf from the side. And then I rinsed my brush, picked up a little of the red, and I'm running the brush around the paper in a circular motion, creating these messy little ovals and circles. And I paint them in a cluster, so they just look like this cluster of perfectly imperfect little berry shapes. From there, you can pick up a bit of green or even brown and continue the stem that runs kind of right through the center. And you can continue to add more leaves to create the perfect sprig of holly, the sprig that is just the right size for your project or your card. Try pulling from both greens, so you might have a little bit of a warmer green or a slightly cooler green. Utilizing both greens is a simple thing you can do that will give your holly a really lively and lifelike look. So this time, let's switch it up. Let's start by painting the berries first. I'm using a number 6 round brush for anyone that's wondering. I'm painting these messy little circles, and I also use just the tip of that brush to add some little stems, just some of them. Then I've got a bit of Van Dyke brown here. You could also use red brown. That's a really nice brown. And I'm just running a stem kind of through the berries and below the berries, and it's going off in 2 directions here. And then without even rinsing my brush, I picked up some green, so it's a mix of brown and green, and I started making some leaf shapes. I do 1 or 2 brush strokes, and then I start using the tip of the brush to just move the pigment outward and create those spikes. Painting the holly is so much fun. Some of the leaves can be spiky, others can be not so spiky, some can be a warm green, others a cool green, or add more water so that some of the leaves are a little more transparent and a much lighter color. And as I said, you'll get this lively look, and it's fun to paint, hard to mess up. And what we're going to do is just fill the entire page. As I said, I'm working on an 8x10 cold pressed block, so I'm just going to paint a whole page of holly, and I hope you'll follow along with me. For this example, what I've done is I've started with not 1 but 3 leaves, joined them together with some delicate stems. I just used the tip of the brush for that, and then I am pushing the pigment outward, giving them their little spikes. It's up to you to sort of know how many you can get away with. Of course, the paint will start to dry, and once it is not wet, especially once it's not even puddle wet, it's going to be really difficult to move that pigment around. But I was able to paint about 2 or 3, and then I could come back in and easily still move the pigment and give the leaf its kind of final form. I love when I add the berries and I put that red right next to the green, and I get some beautiful blending of red and green. I mean, that's to me what watercolor painting is all about, that little bit of magic, that bleeding and blending of the colors and the really organic, fluid look that you get. So as you practice, play around with stuff like that and let those colors sit together and move together. The nice thing about doing a whole practice page is, you can make a mess of some of them. That's totally fine. Let's start off bad and don't worry about it. And then just start a whole second practice page. I think if you paint these close enough together, even if you make a mess, you could easily rip up little 4x4 squares and use it as gift tags, so even your practice can become something that's useful, something that's beautiful. Nobody's going to be like, oh, those hollies are weird. They're going to be like, wow, you painted a gift tag? That's really cool. And you can see that what I'm doing is I'll start with the berries sometimes, other times I start with the leaves. So I'm just figuring out how I really enjoy painting them and what feels best for me. For this next one, what I'm doing is I'm starting with the leaves, and I want to make them really thin and a bit smaller. So up until this point, I've been doing these big kind of voluptuous leaves. And for this one, I was actually really looking at the holly sprig to my left and saying, what am I really seeing? And what I'm seeing is these thin, really tightly clustered leaves. And so I'm painting 1 or 2, and then I move the pigment out, giving them all their spikes. I'm keeping them really close together, and I'm keeping them rather thin. I'm taking a little bit of brown and running a thin, perfectly imperfect stem right through the center and continuing it below. I'll add 1 or 2 more leaves. You can always add a bit of a branch to some of your leaves and not others. I think that looks nice. We'll rinse our brush, pick up our red, and just do a cluster of little ovals. And you can make that cluster as large or small as you like. You can have them all touching or none of them touching, try different things. Let's continue that brown stem below the berries and through the berries. And then maybe we'll add like one or two more leaves here. And I'm getting a really nice blend of color on that. So I think I'm going to add another and try for another nice blend of brown and red and green. And this is just looking so Christmassy. It looks so good. We're going to keep painting and fill this entire page, but for the next one, I thought, what if I did a holly sprig, but the leaves aren't spiky? And sure, that's not really how it is in life, but maybe I'm painting a Christmas card and I just want to do some smooth, organic leaf shapes with some red berries, just something festive and pretty. Maybe this would go with a beautiful wintry floral. So I'm just practicing doing loose leaf shapes by running that belly of the brush across the paper, one or two fluid motions, and then come back in with the tip of the brush to help refine the shape of the leaf, and then add the stem, add some berries. So I'm just playing around because I don't have to use the reference religiously. I can just decide, hey, maybe I'm doing a wintry floral and I want these rather smooth, large leaves. So one or two brush strokes with that round brush, moving the belly across the paper, and then you use the very delicate tip of that round brush to do detail work like the stems, the branches, and also refining the shape of the leaf. Like if you want to add a point to the end of it, which you may or may not need to. One or two brush strokes, then refine and add a little delicate stem. And that's all we do with leaves. That's my leaf formula, foolproof Shayda Campbell leaves. We'll add some berries to this. We can come back in with a bit of brown and continue the branch there. Maybe add some brown up at the top here as well. And if that isn't perfect for a winter floral Christmas card, I don't know what is. Well, that is looking to me like a whole page of holly. We've practiced, it looks good. We've done holly in different styles and through different approaches. And now what I'm doing is I'm mixing a little bit of indigo into my green to really darken it up. At this point, you could also try just adding more green, like, having less water in there. You want a nice, dark, concentrated, richly pigmented green, because our holly sprigs have started to dry, and that means we can do a little wet on dry. It's just what it sounds like, adding wet pigment on top of dry paint, and this allows us to be really, really precise, because when that pigment is wet, you're getting a lot of blending and bleeding. Now that it's dry, now that everything is dry, using a highly pigmented paint and a small paintbrush, we have the precision of like a marker or pen, and we can come back in and add some really beautiful detail and shading to our holly leaves and to the berries actually. So what I'm doing is, you can see me doing some kind of loose veining lines on some of the leaves, but I'm also just doing like some splotches of dark green. Where do I put those splotches, you ask? I just put them wherever. There's not a science to it, really. I mean, you could say like, oh, this leaf is sitting underneath this other one, so I'm going to shade this side a little bit more or whatever. But oftentimes I just put a splotch kind of sitting near the stem, and it goes a long way towards making the leaf look as though it is sort of bent or folded, or the berry is casting a little bit of a shadow. And not only are we painting shadow, we're painting detail, like the little veining lines, and it's really bringing our holly sprigs to life. If some of them are still a little wet, you can play around and experiment with that. That's wet into wet. So if some of these are still lightly wet, we might get a little blend of the darker color, and that's okay. A bit of a softening of that dark color can be really, really pretty as well. So just use the tip of the brush for those thin little lines and just think perfectly imperfect. And sometimes less is more, like not every leaf needs all the lines. Some of them just need a messy splotch, and then you leave it alone. With that done, I'm going to rinse my brush, pick up a little bit of violet, and add some violet into my red. That's a really nice way to darken the red, make it a little cooler, a little bit more like a burgundy color. And then you can add the burgundy to the berries in the same way. So just doing like a little crescent moon shape on some of them, or even just a little dot, will help them appear much more spherical, much more rounded. And same thing, little goes a long way. Not every berry needs that shading. Okay, let's rinse our brush and set it down because we are done with our practice. So we'll set that aside as well and come back over to this guy. Don't forget about your little wash. It should be totally dry by now. And we've got all the colors mixed up. We have practiced. We have done so much practice. And so for this rather simple final piece, all we're going to do is paint a single sprig of holly on top of the peachy colored wash. And you can look at your practice and say, what was my favorite one? What sort of shape really worked for me? What sort of approach worked for me? Do I like painting the berries first or the leaves first? If it stresses you out, you're like, I'm going to mess this up. I know I am. You could always lay down the shape in pencil. Like for this one, I chose to do kind of a Y-shaped holly branch. And so I could have just done a little pencil Y to show me where that middle branch will be sitting. Instead, I didn't bother with that. I just started by painting the leaves, and then I'm dropping down here and I'm going to add the berries. I can kind of see it in my head. I know where I want to go with this, but yeah, don't feel weird about starting in pencil, especially since you've already, taken the time to do that beautiful wash. And then I'm grabbing some brown. I did mix a little violet into the brown as well, and that just darkens it and it really cuts the yellow tones in the brown. So I've got this really cool wintry brown. You can see the Y shape of my holly sprig really coming together, or coming out at this point. And now that I've painted some leaves and the berries and even the branches, all I want to do is grab some more green. I've added a little water to it so it's a little lighter for some of them. And I just want to fill in and add leaves until I feel like this botanical painting looks good. I put kind of a thin leaf right in the middle so it's on a bit of an angle. I'm going to add some leaves surrounding the berries near the base here, and then I'm done. I will let that dry, and just like the practice, I'll give it a minute, and then when I'm sure it's dry, I'll come back in with a darker, more highly pigmented green, and I'll just do some splotches and some lines. And if some of it is still a little wet, that can be okay as well. As I said, you might actually like a bit of a softening on your shading, on your darker green. With that all done, I think all the detail work looks really good. I just need to remove that washi tape, or if you use painter's tape, get it off of there. We've got this beautiful clean white border. All of a sudden that peachy color block just pops, and we are looking at a gorgeous wintry finished piece. To complete the practice, I simply labeled it Holly Practice and signed it, and that kind of looks so much better now as well. And that is it for me, guys. Thanks for voting for Watercolor Holly. I had a lot of fun with it. If you want to be involved in the November video vote, head over to patreon.com/Shayda Campbell to sign up. You are now able to sign up for free. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you soon.